Hi, welcome back. And we're going to be talking about Sophocles. We are going to be reading two of his plays, Oedipus the King and Antigone. Sophocles was born about 495 BC and he died in 406 BC. So he's an older contemporary of Socrates. And he was already 67 years old when Plato was born. Plato mentions him by name in the first book of the Republic, where he has the old man Sophocles refer to the aged poet Sophocles. Sophocles' life coincides with the rise and the fall of Athens. He was born just before the victory over the Persians at the Battle of Marathon, and he died just before the end of the disastrous Peloponnesian War, which forever terminated Athens' hopes of being a great military power. And he lived through the golden age of Athens. Indeed, we may fairly say that Sophocles was one of those men whose achievements gave that age its luster. So undisputed was Athens' leadership in the arts and sciences that Pericles in his famous speech boasted, "As a city, we are the school of Hellas," which really means that Athens sets the tone and the foundation of all the learning and culture of the Hellenistic world, or in Greece, and truly is the foundation of all of our education as well. Now, I've just mentioned the Republic, I've mentioned the Battle of Marathon, the Peloponnesian War. We're going to read about all of these things this year, so keep that in mind. Sophocles is said to have written 120 plays, and only 7 of them survive. He competed for the tragic prize in the annual competition 32 times, and he won at least 18 times, we know. He may have certainly, we may certainly assume that Oedipus the King represents one such victory. He has been considered a model of tragedy. Oedipus the King has been considered a model of tragedy. Aristotle, in his book On Poetics, which we'll read later, draws on it more than any other play to illustrate his points. One note about the 2 plays here, and a third one called Oedipus at Colonus, which we will not read. Antigone is all about Oedipus's daughter, and yet it was written before the other 2. The 3 plays are really not a trilogy. Like when we read about Aeschylus, those were a trilogy. This is not. These 3 are not. But they do follow each other, with Oedipus the King being the first one in chronological order, and Oedipus at Colonus next, and then Antigone third. So we're only going to be reading the 2 listed here on this slide. Like the word happy, the word tragic is one that men use in a wide variety of senses. Yet all of us share the sense that these adjectives are as opposite in their meaning as white and black. In this, we are probably carrying over from our earlier education the memory that a tragic play, such as Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet, is one that does not have a happy ending, right? But what is true of ancient dramas? They cannot be both happy and tragic, may not be true of human lives. For instance, and on the contrary, the deepest trait of our earthly existence may be that the element of tragedy enters into the lives of all of us, even the happiest of mortals. These 2 tragedies of Sophocles that we'll read help us to understand this. Though one of the story is of a king and the other is of a princess, what befalls them could really befall any of us. Take note here, Oedipus and Antigone are each confronted with a choice between alternatives, neither of which of these alternatives can really possibly turn out well. Yet they still have to choose. There is no escaping that, nor, having chosen, can they escape the consequences of their choice. Were they not free to choose, the catastrophe that overtakes them would not be of their own making, but purely a work of fate. Think of the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and they have to choose to multiply and replenish the earth, and they also have to choose. They have a choice to. They're commanded to do that, but they're also commanded not to eat of the tree of good and evil. But they have to choose one or the other, and really the only one they can choose, it seems, is to eat of the fruit of the tree of good and evil. And then that allows them to be able to do what God has commanded them in the other sense. So really, it's interesting that they were they were free to choose that. And so it is of their own making, and they were able to open the doors to bring all of us onto the earth. So I've never seen the choice of eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil as a sin, but I've seen it as a transgression, something where they transgressed the law. They just chose that, and it being a really good choice in the end. So it's really going back to what I was saying. Were they not free to choose, the catastrophe that overtakes them would not be of their own making. So being brought into this earthly world, Adam and Eve chose to do it, and it was of their own making. So all of us, in small measure or great, have tasted the bitterness of defeat at our own hands. Unavoidable because we must choose and cannot find an alternative that is not fraught with evil. This is the tragic element which, once we see it writ large in the tragedies of Oedipus and Antigone, we can detect in our own lives and in those of all around us. So Oedipus's and Antigone's tragic experiences will help us detect in our own lives the consequences of our choices, and that we cannot escape those consequences. They just come when we choose. So the summary of the play is, and you'll see this in the assignment as well, you can read this, it's from Spark Notes. In this slide here, you see on the left, King Oedipus and Queen Jocasta are sitting on the bench. And the man in the middle, who's standing supported with a stick, is the blind prophet Tiresias. He is in front of many men on the right-hand side, and those are the men of Thebes. So as you're looking at this slide, I'm going to tell you the summary of the play so that as you read it, you already know the story and you can go more deeply into understanding the words and the effects that Sophocles has on the people telling the story. And so that you can also focus on one of the main themes was Oedipus trying to find out who he really is. Okay? So here we open the play, and there is a plague that has stricken Thebes. The citizens gather outside the palace of their king, Oedipus asking him to take action. Oedipus replies that he already sent his brother-in-law Creon to the oracle at Delphi to learn how to help the city. And Creon returns with a message from the oracle. And this is the message. The plague will end when the murderer of Laius, former king of Thebes, is caught and expelled. The murderer is within the city. So Oedipus questions Creon about the murder of Laius, who was killed by thieves and on his way to consult an oracle. Only one of his fellow travelers escaped alive, he finds out. And Oedipus promises to solve the mystery of Laius's death, vowing to curse and drive out the murderer. He really wants to save his people from this plague. So Oedipus sends for Tiresias, the blind prophet, and he asks him what he knows about the murder. Tiresias responds cryptically, lamenting his ability to see the truth when the truth brings nothing but pain. So he doesn't want to say anything because it's going to bring pain. So at first he refuses to tell Oedipus what he knows, and now Oedipus curses and insults the old man and goes so far as to accuse him of the murder. And these taunts provoke Tiresias into revealing that Oedipus himself is the murderer. What? Oedipus naturally refuses to believe Tiresias' accusation, and he accuses Creon and Tiresias of conspiring against his life and charges Tiresias with insanity. He asks why Tiresias did nothing when Thebes was suffering under a plague once before. At that time, it was a sphinx that was holding the city captive and had refused to leave until someone answered her riddle. Oedipus brags that he alone was able to solve the riddle. Tiresias defends his skills as a prophet, noting that Oedipus's parents found him trustworthy. At this mention of his parents, Oedipus, who grew up in a distant city in Corinth, asks how Tiresias knew his parents. But Tiresias answers enigmatically. Then, before leaving the stage, Tiresias puts forth one last riddle, saying that the murderer of Laius will turn out to be both father and brother to his own children, and the son of his own wife. After Tiresias leaves, Oedipus threatens Creon with death or exile for conspiring with the prophet. Oedipus's wife Jocasta, also the widow of King Laius, enters and asks why the men shout at one another. Oedipus explains to Jocasta that the prophet has charged him with Laius's murder, and Jocasta replies that all prophecies are false. Isn't that interesting? When you don't like something, you just say that they're false, right? So as proof, she notes that the Delphic oracle once told Laius and herself he would be murdered, or Laius would be murdered by his son, when in fact his son was cast out of Thebes as a baby, and Laius was murdered by a band of thieves. So just kind of explaining this a little bit better, way back when Jocasta and Laius were married, they hadn't had children, an oracle told Laius. An oracle is kind of a prophet or a prophetess that will tell the future, okay? So this Delphic oracle told Laius that someday he would be murdered by his son. And so what he and his wife did was they took their first baby and took it out to the countryside and let it be exposed to the elements and die, so that this oracle wouldn't happen, right? So her description, now she comes to the description of Laius's murder with Oedipus. She says, well, this is what happened with Laius. However, as she was describing it, it started to sound familiar to Oedipus, and he asks further questions. Jocasta tells him that Laius was killed at a three-way crossroads just before Oedipus arrived in Thebes. Oedipus, stunned, tells his wife that he may be the one who murdered Laius. He tells Jocasta that long ago, when he was the prince of Corinth, he overheard someone mention at a banquet that he was not really the son of the king and queen of Corinth. He therefore traveled to the oracle of Delphi, trying to find out who he was, right? And the oracle did not answer him, but did tell him he would murder his father and sleep with his mother. So hearing this, and wanting to be honest, wanting to be good, he fled from his home, never to return. It was then on this journey that he would come to Thebes, way far away from where he grew up, right? And Oedipus was confronted and harassed by a group of travelers at that three-way crossroads, and he killed Laius in self-defense. And this skirmish occurred at the very crossroads where Laius was killed. Okay, so he's starting to put a lot of things together here. So Oedipus sends for the man who survived the attack, who is a shepherd, in the hope that he will not be identified as the murderer. That Oedipus would not be identified as the murderer. Outside the palace, a messenger approaches Jocasta and tells her that he has come from Corinth to inform Oedipus that his father Polybus is dead. Now this is the king from Corinth, okay? And that Corinth has asked Oedipus to come and rule there in his place. Jocasta rejoices, convinced that Polybus's death from natural causes, rather than being killed by his son, has disproved the prophecy that Oedipus would murder his father. Yay! So at Jocasta's summons, Oedipus comes outside, hears the news, and rejoices with her. He now feels much more inclined to agree with the queen in deeming prophecies worthless and viewing the idea of chance as the principle that's governing the world. But while Oedipus finds great comfort in the fact that one half of the prophecy has been disproved, he still fears the other half, the half that claimed he would sleep with his mother. The messenger remarks that Oedipus need not worry, because Polybus and his wife Merope are not Oedipus's biological parents. The messenger, a shepherd by profession, knows firsthand that Oedipus came to Corinth as an orphan. One day long ago, he was tending his sheep while another shepherd approached him carrying a baby, its ankles pinned together. The messenger took the baby to the royal family of Corinth, and they raised him as their own. That baby was Oedipus. Oedipus asks who the other shepherd was, and the messenger answers that he was a servant of Laius. Oedipus asks that his shepherd be brought forth to testify. But Jocasta, beginning to suspect the truth, look at what happens when some people begin to suspect truth, and truth is painful. She begs her husband not to seek more information. She runs back into the palace. The shepherd then enters. Oedipus interrogates him, asking who gave him the baby, and the shepherd refuses to disclose anything, and Oedipus threatens him with torture. Finally, he answers that the child came from the house of Laius. Questioned further, he answered that the baby was in fact the child of Laius himself, and that it was Jocasta who gave him the infant, ordering him to kill it, as it had been prophesied that the child would kill his parents. But the shepherd pitied the child and decided that the prophecy could be avoided just as well if the child were to grow up in a foreign city far from his true parents. The shepherd therefore passed the boy on to the shepherd in Corinth. And realizing who he is and who his parents are, Oedipus now screams that he sees the truth, and he flees back into the palace. He is abhorred. He does not want to have killed his father or married his mother. That's just not something he wanted. So the shepherd and the messenger slowly exit the stage, and a second messenger enters and describes the scenes of suffering. Now here is where we have a lot of things happening backstage, off the scene, what we call obscene, right? We learned that in an earlier video. So we don't have to see all of the graphic action in the back. Aristotle talks about if we see all of those things right there on the stage, our human nature wants to run down and save them and fight off the people who are beating them, right? Or hurting them. But of course we can't do that in a play. A play is just to show us some of the consequences that happen of people's choices. And so those kinds of things happen off stage, okay? And so this messenger describes the scenes of suffering, and he says that Jocasta has hanged herself, and that Oedipus, finding her dead, has pulled the pins from her robe and stabbed out his own eyes. And Oedipus now emerges from the palace, bleeding and begging to be exiled. He asks Creon, this is Jocasta's brother, to send him away from Thebes and to look after his daughters, Antigone and Ismene. Creon, covetous of royal power, so he wants to become king now, is all too happy to oblige. So, there are these events that I've just mentioned that take place before the time of the play and that are recounted on stage right there in front of Oedipus. They're told not only for the benefit of the audience, you and I, but they're also told for the benefit of the players themselves, people who don't know about all of these events. You're going to notice that many of the events are unknown to Oedipus as well as to the audience, unknown to Jocasta, some of them. Hence, the telling of them is more than a filling in of spectators. Instead, it is one of the most important parts of the tragedy. So the ignorance of Oedipus concerning his parentage and concerning what he himself did, together with his coming to know the truth about these things, is what this tragedy is all about. So here are some of the things that have happened. Laius, the king of Thebes, was warned by an oracle that his son would slay him. So he and Jocasta, so when a son was born to Laius and Jocasta, Laius had him taken to the forest to die from exposure. So, and we learned that Jocasta gives the baby to the shepherd and the shepherd takes him. But another shepherd is there and meets the other shepherd, and he takes pity on the infant and brings him to his king, Polybus of Corinth, who adopted and raised him as their son. So in early manhood, Oedipus visited Delphi, and upon learning from an oracle that he was fated to kill his father and marry his mother, he resolved never to return to Corinth. He did not want to do any of that. He wanted to be far away and live a good life. So he traveled toward Thebes, and he encountered Laius, who provoked a quarrel in which Oedipus, in his own defense, killed him. Continuing on his way, Oedipus found Thebes plagued by the Sphinx, who put a riddle to all passers-by and destroyed those who could not answer. And this riddle is not really in the play itself, because these things have happened before the play, but the riddle was something like this. What is 4-footed in the morning, 2-footed in the afternoon, and 3-footed at evening? Well, Oedipus guessed correctly that it was a man, because the man starts out as a child who crawls on their hands and feet in the morning of their life. And the adult walks upright in the afternoon of their life. And the old man supports his step with a stick, becoming a 3-footed person in the evening of his life. So Oedipus solved the riddle, and the Sphinx killed herself. As a reward for guessing the riddle, he received the throne of Thebes and the hand of the widowed queen, his biological mother, Jocasta. But he doesn't know it yet. And they had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, Eteocles and Polynices, and Antigone and Ismene. So later, when the truth became known, Jocasta committed suicide, and Oedipus, after blinding himself, went into exile, accompanied by Antigone and Ismene, his 2 daughters, and leaving his brother-in-law Creon as regent. Oedipus died at Colonus near Athens, where he was swallowed into the earth and became a guardian hero of the land. And we'll hear a little bit more of that one. Is actually, that last fact is actually found in the other play that we're not going to be reading, which is called Oedipus at Colonus. So the events that you've just heard with me have a bearing on the play. Those events are super important on having Oedipus find out who he is. And they certainly cover a period of at least 20 years. and they take place in a variety of locations. Yet look at this. The playwright Sophocles has managed through his incredible skill to let the events of these 20 years make themselves felt in the course of the play's action, during a time that can hardly exceed 2 hours, and all in one place, namely before the royal palace of Thebes. He can do that, obviously, only not by being a chronicler of the 20 years in the life of Oedipus, but by being instead concerned with only one thing in Oedipus's life. That one thing, of course, is the discovery of who he is. All other events in and around the play have bearing only on that. This is a pretty amazing method of writing. If any of you are going to become writers and you want to really make something powerful, you focus on one thing, and that's your thesis statement, right? And everything that you write has to do with that thesis statement and the supporting statements with it. So this is what Sophocles wanted to do. He wanted a play about the discovery of who Oedipus really was, and it being a self-discovery, okay? So everything that had to do with that discovery was what we read. We didn't have any of the other stuff around it. So it became a very powerful play. So Oedipus' discovery of himself involves more than merely finding out who his parents were. It also involves showing him the spectators and what manner of man he is. He had a good opinion of himself. At the very beginning of the play, when he addresses the chorus of the Theban elders, he uses the expression, "I, Oedipus, renowned of all." And part of his pride was no doubt due to having solved the riddle of the Sphinx. It was for this achievement that the Thebans made him king. But after the Sphinx throws herself down from the mountain and to her death, and all of these things happen, and the knowledge of who Oedipus is in truth, the concluding passage of the play is of the chorus referring to the achievement of Oedipus. And you can follow along with me on page 251 of the Penguin Classics version with Robert Fagles as the translator. He says, or the play says, "People of Thebes," I guess I should say the chorus says, "The people of Thebes, my countrymen, look on Oedipus. He solved the famous riddle with his brilliance. He rose to power, a man beyond all power. Who could behold his greatness without envy? Now what a black sea of terror, and wait the final day. Count no man happy till he dies, free of pain at last." That brings in the last interesting theme of all Greeks, that happiness really can't be counted until the end of our lives, when we see where we are. Have we done all that we needed to do? Are we gone from this world of pain and into the upper world without pain, according to the Greeks? So with that, go ahead and begin reading. You know the story now. You can see the theme. You're recognizing that the main theme is a self-discovery. You're also recognizing that we never can escape the consequences of our choices. It may never happen that we do exactly what Oedipus has done, but there will be many, many times where we do not know the full truth, and we act in what we think is right, and we find out that we were premature in our thinking and that we've made a mistake. And we probably won't poke our eyes out. We probably will look and face the truth and begin to right the wrongs. And that's what makes our lives happier, right? Let this play get inside you and really help you understand that you'll never be able to escape the consequences of your choices. And let it help you discover who you are. We'll see you next time.